We would be honored if you would join us.
Greetings and welcome to another YouTube episode of Film Stories with me, Dan Cooper. This week we're doing a good old-fashioned film story. We're going back to look at the 1983 film The Outsiders, a classic tale of coming-of-age drama, of gang violence, of brotherhood. But really, it's this film's cast which kind of makes it stand out in the annals of film history. Not only was its director Francis Ford Coppola, you may have heard of, but its cast, even looking back at it now, is just hugely impressive. So many young actors who are on the cusp of breaking through and did break through after this film. Let's just start with that cast. So C. Thomas Howell, Matt Dillon, Ralph Macchio, Patrick Swayze, Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, Tom Cruise, Diane Lane, all who would just go on to do huge things, and a couple of appearances as well for bit pop players. Sofia Coppola would appear too in this film, and just as a very small role. And you can also add, if you like me keep a list of films that the Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea makes a cameo in, well, he appears in this film too. That one I didn't know about until I was researching this film. But it's a cast, really, looking back now, that would go on collectively to do great things. They would be infamously known as the Brat Pack, and films like Say Almost Fire and The Breakfast Club would follow. But also individually, it would act as a breakout for careers such as for Patrick Swayze and for Tom Cruise, for example, to forge huge solo careers. But we'll come back to them shortly. Let's start with the very beginning of this film story, though, and that begins with a novel. So the writer, Susie Hinton, who wasn't a writer actually, she was just a teenager who wanted to read about teenagers like her, but she couldn't find books that she felt reflected her experience, and so she decided to write her own. Based on an episode of gang violence that she witnessed, she took 2 years to write what would become The Outsiders, and through a circuitous route managed to get it published, of giving it to a friend's mother who was a writer who had an agent, and as these things happen, the story found its way into publishing, and it took a while, but it was a success, because it was seen as portraying, I suppose in many ways, like the James Dean film Rebel Without a Cause. It was seen as portraying the perils of being a teenager, but also having in a sensitive and emotional way too. And as such, it was a success. How it got to Francis Ford Coppola, though, is an interesting story in itself. It was mailed to him by a high school librarian. I'm getting all these details, by the way, in James King's really rather good account of the 80s coming-of-age films, which is called Fast Times and Excellent Adventures. I definitely recommend it. A high school librarian decided that this book, The Outsiders, should be a film, and so she mailed it to a director that she thought was worthy of making the project, Francis Ford Coppola. And somehow this letter got into the hands of Coppola, and he decided that he was going to make it. At this point in Coppola's career, he'd endured a pretty bruising process of filmmaking, most notably with his recent Vietnam War movie Apocalypse Now, and so he was looking for something that was a little bit more straightforward and that felt a little bit more comfortable, like home. And so the idea of getting to hang out with kids and to some degree getting to be a kid was really appealing to Coppola, especially given as well as Apocalypse Now, which had been an ordeal, a legendary ordeal certainly to film. There was also a really ambitious musical, One from the Heart, that Coppola was trying some new things with. He was trying some new technologies with. He wanted to redefine filmmaking with his studio Zoetrope. He really wanted to, and he wouldn't be the first or the last to try this, but to take power out of the hands of the studios and redefine the rules of Hollywood filmmaking. But of course, it wasn't going to plan, and One from the Heart especially was running way over budget and causing him all kinds of financial headaches. So there was just a huge amount of appeal for him that this film was The Outsiders was a project which augured a sense of therapy for him. So he read the book, he was interested, and he wanted to make the film. So the casting began, and I suppose this is one of those times if you could choose to be a fly on the wall during Hollywood, being in the casting room for The Outsiders, and as Darren Dalton, and this is in King's book, Darren Dalton, who was driven to an open casting session, talks about getting to sit in the room, say his lines, and then just watch as actors like Emilio Estevez came in, Mickey Rourke came in, and Dalton talks about his kind of method style. He just came in and just blew everyone away. It says he slammed a chair across the room and did it with such force that Rourke hurt his hand and had to be taken to the hospital. Seeing Tom Cruise come in, and then Matt Dillon, who at the time was just hot property, coming in and just blowing everybody away. I mean, that would be quite an experience to recollect on. So casting was done over a period of weeks, and slowly that cast came together. Although some of the players, such as Rob Lowe, would join the production a little bit later. Once Coppola had his casting in mind, though, he really wanted to push the sense that these boys were cohesive, that sense of a band of brothers, that they were rash, they were aggressive, and so he brought in local extras that were, some of them, from the streets, because he wanted to add an extra level of toughness and authenticity to the fight scenes. And Patrick Swayze in the book at one point recalls one actual gang member during a shot coming for him, and Swayze talking about having to put him down before the guy did the same to him. It seemed like it was a very boisterous shoot. And that extended to the off-camera antics as well, as you can imagine, with a bunch of young men, the alpha male, playing gangs by day. There were some quite boisterous activities going on off-camera too. And also, a lot of these actors were relatively inexperienced. I mean, not everybody. Obviously, an actor like Emilio Estevez had with a father like Martin Sheen, had seen the business inside out, and he had even accompanied his father, to the set of Apocalypse Now while he shot it. But others like Tom Cruise were fairly new to the game, and there is one story that King recounts about Cruise getting his per diem, and not realizing that it meant that was his money to spend per day, and was living really frugally because he thought he had to make that last him indefinitely. So there was a real sense of rawness throughout the production, but Coppola used that and developed that to get the performances that you see on screen. And Tom Cruise in particular was enthusiastic throughout the role, even staying on after his character's shoot finished, because he just wanted to be part of the production. And one of Coppola's production assistants talks about the fact that he was so happy to be there. He was happily doing photocopying and doing chores around the set just because he wanted to be part of it. And that enthusiasm, as we well know, has continued well into Cruise's career, and has served him pretty well too, I might add. So when The Outsiders wrapped up shooting and released, it did solid business. It came out in the spring of 1983, and from a $10 million budget, it made $33 million. So it tripled its production budget. Even that being the case, Warner Brothers, who'd financed the film, weren't interested in Coppola's idea for if not a follow-up, then a companion piece. He wanted to make something that was a little less narrative, a little bit more art house and experimental, called Rumblefish, and he'd been scripting that throughout the process of filming The Outsiders. It was a companion piece in the sense that it was set in the same city, which is Tulsa, and it followed a character that would eventually be played by Matt Dillon, who would stick around after the production of The Outsiders ceased. And Diane Lane too, actually. So it was more of an art house movie, and I think Warner Brothers sensed that and were keen not to divest themselves at that point. They'd got a success out of The Outsiders, but they weren't willing to gamble on something that was just a little more non-mainstream, and as so they said no. But of course, Coppola still got to make the film Rumblefish. It wouldn't prove to be anywhere near as memorable in terms of commercially as The Outsiders, but Coppola had at least he'd made his point with the two films, and especially with The Outsiders, especially after the gross excesses of Apocalypse Now as well, and of the financial problems with a few of his films at that point, which was with a modest budget he could stick to it, and he could make successful films, but still on his own terms, and he had fun too. He enjoyed the experience. The actors themselves, as I mentioned at the outset, collectively, a few of them will be going to become known as the Brat Pack and produce again some really memorable films from the 80s, and there will be some breakout stars too. Patrick Swayze needs no introduction. He would go on to forge a great career, and Tom Cruise immediately after this would I think he'd even auditioned during Days Off on The Outsiders. He would go on to make Risky Business, where he'd take that same kind of role as a teenage boy, but use the confidence he gained during The Outsiders to make a film that really kind of pushed the boundaries for him a little bit, but certainly cemented his star status as an actor. So looking back on it now, The Outsiders remains something of an interesting curio. It's not only a good film, and not only does it tread that line really well, as I said at the start, that a film like Rebel Without a Cause had done previously of presenting that tough, aggressive side of teenagers who are struggling for identity, but also it shows that softer side as well, and that's not always an easy thing to do, but The Outsiders does it, and does it well, and just happens to boast one of the most amazing lineups in terms of casting of the 80s. So if you get a chance to recheck it out if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. That's me for this week. I hope you enjoyed that brief look back at The Outsiders. If you want more film stories, do check out our print magazine. Issue 19 is just gone on sale and features the outstanding British horror Saint Maud on the cover. On top of that, we've got Film Stories Junior, the world's only magazine written for under 15s by under 15s. So check that out too. Don't forget, of course, filmstories.co.uk, the website where we have all kinds of interesting film writing, including news updates every day. You can find us on Twitter at Film Stories Pod. You can find us on Facebook at Film Stories Online. And don't forget Simon's excellent podcasts that you can find at a podcast downloader of your choice. That is all for me this week. I'll be back next week with more film stories. Bye bye.